Hi. Oh, so, first things first. Can I hear myself? Yes, I can. Excellent. All right. Hello, people. So, I think I've got it all worked out. Sounding better than last time, I hope. um, oh, I've knocked the camera. Oops. How did I do that? Oh, oh, hold on. Let me fix this. It's that's more or less right. Okay. Yeah, I had a last second issue with my camera and had to adjust it, and then I knocked it. Apparently, I was getting back in my seat. Oh, so how are we all? My my day's going better than it was this morning when everything was going wrong. Technically, I think I've got it all sorted out. Oh, that's good to hear, SRG. So I'll just wait for a few people to find out that this stream exists. Oh, I still have trouble with that hand symbol. I know it's being used in a completely, you know, normal context here. Ever since that Australian piece of shit did that in the courthouse. Oh boy. They do. The fascists always ruin things. It's very correct. I think that's part of what they love to do. Like the well, I mean, it started with the swastika. You know, that's a Buddhist symbol that's associated with various East Asian languages. Paint eyelash. I was referring to the terrorist who killed 50 people in Christchurch. I like to emphasize the fact that he was Australian. I know I shouldn't, but hmm, I do think it is noteworthy that he was Australian. I mean, he was assisted by a bunch of local Christchurch-based neo Nazis and stuff. You know, I'm not saying we don't got him. We got him. I mean, their lives aren't particularly easy anymore. But especially in Christchurch, they've really turned on them. Yeah, well, that's the thing, Painokis saying about fascists doing the Roman sword. Yeah, I mean, these days it's all fucking meme culture and stuff, you know? I agree with that, buddy in the box. New Zealand fascist does not sound intimidating. I mean, those Christchurch neo Nazi guys, like, they would beat brown people up on the street and stuff. They weren't like nothing, you know? I actually, a friend of my family on my mother's side was actually Indian guy, was assaulted in the street by four neo Nazis in broad daylight. Yeah, but you know that's a different thing altogether from killing lots of people. It's funny. I always want to like start light before I get into the more heavy stuff at the start of the streams. That's not working out well today. But that's the thing, you know. I mean, one of the videos I wanted to touch on was well, not just videos, I guess, but channels in general. Is Cody Johnson, you know, some more news. He's did a video a while, well, pretty recently, um, in which he was talking about. I don't worry, Bunny in the Box. It's what I'm talking about. It's 2020. This stuff is bound to come up. It's bleak times, you know. That's not your fault. Um, yeah. Anyway, Cody was saying that, you know, like in an atmosphere of bad times in the world, it's kind of irresponsible to focus on the good things. Um, so like just try and, oh, I don't want to logo this up, so let's alter that. I don't want to focus on the positive to the exclusion of negative stuff, because that's irresponsible. I think in your own life that's fine, and that's kind of what this stream is going to be ultimately about. But you know, I wouldn't do that um, in a live stream, even though, you know, I don't exactly have a massive reach or anything. But I think any amount of reach, it's kind of your responsibility to be to take the good and the bad in an environment like this. And I think you can be forgiven for only focusing on negative stuff, but not the other way around. Not in a time like this. That was Cody's video about that good news scam thing, John Krasinski scam thing, and how it's like uncool, really, actually really uncool to just like try and make a good news show in a time like this. Um, and that, you know, it's emblematic of things like, you know, the same thing when he tweeted out that John Krasinski tweeted out that gif of like cops hugging protesters. And it's like, this is the same kind of mind that creates a good news show in 2020. The kind of person who would put that bootlicking bootlicking gif together of those cops. I don't know if it was a gif. I think it was maybe a bit too long for that, but man. Oh, and it had music too, didn't it? So it was just a video, I guess. But yeah, holy crap, that was not great. So anyway, what I wanted to mainly talk about in this stream is, so ever since I sort of stopped making content actively, I've had a bit of a pattern last couple of years where things have gotten tough for me in my life, and I've kind of shrunken my sphere of interaction down and trying to sort of laser focus on one thing. And that one thing being, well, in the first go round last year, it was something of no real consequence. It was comics. I just got really, really into specific comic sort of stories, interconnected narratives spanning multiple different things and stuff, and get really into that and just got absorbed into that and let the sort of rest of the world drift into the background. And I feel that's, I really I think that is a tactic that you could use. But this year it's kind of been different. This year, for one thing, like in 2019, it was me that was having the problems, mental health stuff mainly. It wasn't just that; there were some physical ailments as well, physical health issues. But so, yeah, I got into comics and that helped with that. But this time around, it wasn't me that had the problem. So I'll start talking about it. My dog, she's a running and jumping, catching balls in her mouth, in midair kind of dog. We used to go in the bush a lot because where near where I live, there's a lot of forestry. Anyway, she years ago developed a condition where she would get a rash on her underbelly, where there's not much fur, and because of a common plant that's in basically every, like under every shrub. And it basically meant that she can only sort of run around on actual grass. Then she developed arthritis in her back legs, which meant that she could only run around on flat grass. And a few months ago, we're doing that, and she likes to have me bounce the ball high up in the air, and then she jumps up and catches it in her mouth, right? And then turns out though she lands pretty hard on her back legs, and I didn't think about that enough. And basically, she snapped a ligament in her knee. That there's a I'm not actually great on the clinical terminology here, but there's you got these X shaped ligaments over your knee, right? I don't know if it's this way in humans actually, but dogs do, and it's a common injury in dogs, in most breeds of dogs except greyhounds, to have problems with these, and one of these two snapped basically. It doesn't exist anymore, and so she basically couldn't walk after that. And it just sort of got worse and worse to the point where I basically couldn't leave the house. She couldn't do anything for herself, and so she had to stop going to daycare and stuff. And um, so I've been basically stranded at home looking after her. And this was about 3 months ago. Well, what do I mean? It doesn't exist. It was obliterated basically in the it wasn't even an accident. It was just the normal jumping up and catching the ball in the air and landing on her back legs thing she always does. I think. Well, the vet said she might have landed on a rock or just a minor incident that was like the straw that broke the camel's back, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. Um, yes. Anyway, I'll give you a flash forward here. By 2 months, 3 months, 2 months, I think. Where after she had surgery, where the surgeon said that there was so much arthritis in her knee that he had to scrape it out like toothpaste. So that's kind of what I mean by it doesn't exist, because it was so worn down by her 5 years of being an athletic dog and always running around and jumping around and stuff that it just obliterated. Yeah. Anyway, so I th- this happened to coincide with the second wave, the much lauded coronavirus second wave. In New Zealand, it wasn't massive. I think there was like 100 total cases in the whole second wave thing. I actually, I don't take me on that. I'm not great on the numbers for this stuff. So actually, I probably shouldn't have said that at all because it's probably wrong. Um, the point is, we didn't. It wasn't a massive deal, but there was a short period where taking your dog to the vet was affected, and it happened to be right when around this time happened. So it was quite a while before I could get her booked into surgery, because you need to make the appointment to have the surgery booked in, and then you got to book it in, and it's always ages in advance. It was more than a month after we booked it that she had it. So everything was like delayed and spread out over quite a long period of time because of the second wave thing. And so I was at home looking after Kara, and I just had to fill my time with stuff. I had a sudden spike in the amount of time I needed to fill. And I'm the kind of person that fills a lot of their time anyway. Like I'm pretty much um a shut in anyway. But even a shut in like me goes to the shops and goes grocery shopping, and so I couldn't do any of that. I had to have help with all of that. Um, and luckily, I have family who stepped in and have been awesome, um, because they love Kara too. Anyway, so I had all this time, and I was filling it with the sort of thing that I do anyway. I was reading books, playing video games, and I just started playing more video games. Um, and I, because I started playing more video games than normal, there was a spike in the amount of YouTube stuff I was watching, when you play games that are quite in depth, you end up watching YouTube videos. Like I play a lot of strategy shit, grand strategy stuff. Where, like for example, one of the games I started playing, I didn't get far with this, but Endless Space Two, right? Endless Space Two is the kind of game where you're honestly better off watching 7 hours worth of YouTube tutorials before even buying the game. Like, it's so complicated that you'd need to know it sufficiently before you think you'll know whether you'll find it fun or not, and you won't know it sufficiently without watching hours worth of YouTube stuff. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. So a lot of YouTube was recommending me a lot more gaming stuff, and it happened on this one video 3 months back, I think, of this sort of cartoon character playing Doom 2016. And I was like, oh, it looks fun. So I clicked on it. And I'd been thinking about getting Doom Eternal. Anyway, I don't think I'd watched anything about Doom Eternal or anything, but, well, maybe I had. Maybe that's why it recommended me this video. Sorry, I'm coughing a lot. um, so I clicked on this video, and it was this cartoon character girl in the corner of the screen playing Doom, speaking in Japanese. And it turns out her name was Korone. And it's reminding me of where things were when I saw the video. Kara, like I said, is an athlete, and she hasn't been able to move really much. Not well. Well, since she's had the surgery, things have been getting better, but there was a long time where she wasn't able to do anything, and she's been dependent on me for everything. And it's just really depressing, to see her. And she's never gonna like fully recover to the point where she would be like she was before. So she's basically gonna be different forever, and she's gonna be on arthritis medication for the rest of her life. So it's sad for me. Anyway, I was watching this video and it was really funny. That was the thing that stood out. Her commentary on the game was really funny, and she's great at like making puns. And so I started watching more of her clips and stuff and translated into English subtitles. And I learned about VTubers. And I got really into it really fast. And the reason I think is twofold. For one thing, I like the idea of cultural exchanges, right? With two different cultures are sort of coming together for whatever reason, hopefully a good one. Um, but usually in cultural exchanges, when you're an English speaker, you're on the other person, the other culture is on the back foot. They have to catch up to you. They have to learn your language and sort of adapt to certain things about your culture. And especially on the internet, the internet version of your culture, because every culture has a slightly different version of itself that exists on the internet. And I'm going to get into that with what I think that is in English culture, the Anglosphere, English language culture. Anyway, what appealed to me about this is that it's a cultural interaction where you're basically the English language speaker is on the back foot. And I don't think I'd really seen that much before, because even with like movies and TV and music and stuff, well, not music, I guess, but movies and TV, it's always translated, right, into English for you. And you don't need to learn whatever the language is. And, you can get by without knowing much about the culture. For example, that Korean film, Parasite, I got more out of that because I know about Korean culture. I've traveled in Korea. I speak a bit of Korean. And I'm quite well versed in Korean culture. So I got more out of that film than the average English language speaker did watching it. But, it's an amazing movie, and you don't need to know that. You don't need to speak Korean or understand Korean culture to know that. It's subtitled or dubbed for you, and the cultural things are only part of it, and you'll get most of it without knowing that stuff. Parasite going into Korean culture. I mean, maybe I could look into see if someone else has already done it, and if they haven't, then I might think about it. It's only like two or three big things about the movie, and they're mostly to do with Korea's relationship with the United States, which is very complicated. Um, it's the history is there was about 20 years ago, I'd say it was pretty black and white, where Korea hated the United States. The Korean government didn't, but the people. But now I think it's a bit more complicated. The version of Korean culture from years later that made that Parasite came out of is more complicated anyway. Well, yeah, I might do. So, but with VTubers, because it's all live, the most you can do is small clips of them talking. That gets translated for you, and you could just stick to that. But that's a very shallow interaction with a culture. I am doing quite well. So it basically forces you what forcing isn't the right word. It heavily incentivized me to learn Japanese, right? And to start trying to understand Japanese culture more because the technology behind VTubers, much like the technology behind Vocaloids, I don't know if people know what Vocaloids are, but it's proprietarily owned by Japanese companies, um, and there's several different corporations developed independent technological branches on their own of each other, but they all are were all Japanese. So there's a few English language speaking ones, but if you want to get really into it, you really do need to sort of understand Japanese culture and Japanese language and stuff. And for me personally, I know there's a lot of English language interest in Japanese language and culture, but I never had that personally. Um, my background academically was in Chinese history, and studying Chinese history, especially of the 20th century, does not make you a massive fan of of Japan, to put it mildly. And I think that's down to the fact that, unlike in Germany, where the German state and people culturally have owned what they did in World War II and before it. And in Japan, that kind of never happened. And that kind of annoyed me. Um, so I was always kind of put off from getting too into like Japanese culture and stuff. Um, I always liked some things. Like I was a big fan of Cromartie High School, the comedy anime, back in the day when that aired. I still am. It's one of the funniest. Um, it's one of the funniest cartoons I've ever seen. But yeah, my interaction with Japanese culture was always very limited compared to my like friends in my circle of friends. Like they got into like Dragon Ball Z and Pokemon and stuff. And I mean Dragon Ball Z as a TV show and Pokemon as video games. I don't think we were I don't think they were watching the cartoon much. But because we were a bit old for that. But the games, they were always playing the games, and the TV show was huge. But I just didn't. Well, I just didn't get into it. Narratively, it was. I found the Dragon Ball Z was very slow, and you didn't get much meat out of each episode. So, and it was all really over the top and stuff. So I never got into it. And then later in my academic years, I was sort of disincentivized from exploring Japanese culture. So yeah, I always felt a bit excluded from that and not interested in it. So it was nice to have a reason to um, to look into it. And there was really some really interesting stuff. It's not 100% good. Let me front load this with that statement. I know I've noticed sort of a strain of authoritarianism that's kind of interesting. I mean, that's there in Chinese culture and Korean culture too, but in Japanese culture, it's a bit different. Um, anyway, so I basically was able to get through the fact that I was had to be home every day looking after Kara and dealing with the fact that she was not the same dog anymore, and that was really sad and still is. Um, but I was able to get through it because I obsessively got into this one thing, just like the previous year with comics, Marvel specifically, and even more specifically things like the Hickman verse and the DNA verse and stuff. So yeah, I just got really, really into this one thing, and focusing on that, not only was that getting me through a difficult problem like the Marvel Comics thing did, but it was more than that. It was bigger than that. And if it had only been the Marvel Comics thing, I wouldn't have done this stream. I think because I also wanted to talk about Marvel Comics. I wanted to do a video about that. That would have been on my other channel, but because like those stories are great and like narratively they're really sophisticated. They're way more narratively sophisticated than anything happening in movies and TV. The Hickman verses. That's like that's deep. That's like yeah, that's awesome. Anyway, I never got around to making the video though because ultimately it'd just be me making a video about like, hey, these comics are really good. There's not a lot of consequence or meat there, like um, for someone who's not paid to do it, there's not a lot to sort of get enthusiastic about making that. There is because the idea of more people reading those comics would be cool, but ultimately it is just entertainment. But with this cultural exchange situation, I think it seemed bigger than that with VTubers. And I assume people in the chat know what a VTuber is, but I don't know. A streamer who's a cartoon character. They're not all streamers, but they're on video personalities who replace their actual body with a cartoon avatar that is animated and moves around and talks and stuff. And a lot of them put on a voice and make it like a whole character. That's part of the culture around it. Um, and so I noticed the cultural exchange thing, and it felt really good to be on the end of a cultural exchange where you're the one putting in all the effort, and that was really new to me, and so I got interested in that. And by the way, Japanese is a tough language. I already knew that because my Chinese tutor at university always told me that she found it harder to learn Japanese than English. The reason for that is because the sentence structure in Japanese is the opposite of English, and in Chinese it's the same as English. I think it's exactly the same. I'm not fluent in Chinese, but I think it's exactly the same. And Japanese is like backwards and it has all these weird particles and stuff. And there's two different alphabets and a character set. There's tons of stuff going on. Anyway, that's off topic. So yeah, I was watching all these VTubers starting to learn Japanese, and I was learning some interesting things about Japanese culture, which actually started to get me back into the internet more because I explained in the previous stream. I'm going to restate probably a few things that I said earlier in my crappy microphone stream. That I basically left all social media, because I don't like how people interact with each other in that sort of anonymous online way, and I just finally kind of clicked that in online interactions, not only do I not like how people treat each other and me, but I'm also definitely guilty of treating people poorly. If you think about that, you don't know what situation the other person's on the other end of this is actually in, where they're at in their life, what they've got going on, who they are, and something that might seem fairly innocuous or even just like sarcastic or rude or vaguely rude might be more than that. And I know in times in the past where that's been true for me and things people have said to me. And I think everyone is SRG. I think it's social media encourages that. It might even make it basically impossible to avoid, but I mean, who knows? Maybe internet culture will be way more sophisticated and pleasant in the future. We can only hope. But yeah. Anyway, But people in VTuber streams, the Japanese commenters, they're always very nice to each other, and nice to each other in the chats and in the comments. Here's an example, right? So there's a music video for a song called Hanatonari by a VTuber called Pompoko. And in that comment section of that video, I was just randomly throwing random Japanese comments from that comment section into the Google Translate, right? And I found one that said it's a very Hanatonari is a sad song. It's it's a celebratory song, but it's got kind of a sad, somber vibe that's kind of low key, and it's quite sad. Anyway, it's also quite a mourning song. It's got a mourning vibe to it, right? And so this comment is like, I listen to this when I'm on my way to work every morning, and it has become my custom to cry every morning on my way to work. And which that's nice. But you see that sort of stuff in English too. That's not that weird. It was the replies that caught my eye. The first reply was, "Thank you for the work you do every day." Isn't that nice? It just seems like a super nice thing to. I don't think I've ever seen anyone in English, reply to someone, just casually reference the fact that they have a job and they go to work every day, and just thank them for that. It just seemed nice. And the reply after that was, now Google Translate here struggled with this one, but I think from what I can tell, he basically said, "Live strong, brother," which I believe he was basically saying that what you're doing is not weak, and that was nice too. And I just noticed stuff like that, people just being nice to each other. There's a downside to this, which is that the interactions aren't, you never feel completely free. you know if you want to be if you want to be an obnoxious asshole to someone, you don't feel free to do that. That's not really a downside, but it extends to more than being an obnoxious asshole. Like, here's an example, right? um just because I was getting into watching VTubers doesn't mean I wasn't an anarchist anymore. I take that everywhere with me. You take your worldview with you with whatever you do. And so, one of the first things I noted is that the big companies treat their workers like shit. They treat their VTubers poorly, their talent. I don't know about the back behind the scenes stuff. Who knows? Probably, I'm guessing they're corporations, profitable corporations. Anyway, so I started gravitating towards the more independent types, um, and the smaller agencies that are just less horrible. Um, and part of that, as part of that moving away, I was watching. There's a group. There's a group called Hollow Live, right? And they're like the biggest company in the scene, the biggest corporation with the biggest stars, and they're especially blowing up at the moment. But they have that they're all female, right? And actually, I'm going to talk about why the fact that VTubers tend to be female was part of why I became interested in it as well. I might as well just do that now because it takes like a couple of sentences, which is that I've always noticed on YouTube that creators, I don't know about necessarily the users, because who knows, they're just usernames, but the creators tend to be overwhelmingly male in every community, even the feminist community, right? Which is kind of nuts. And so to see this one community, VTuber community, where the men are the ones who are like an endangered species that you spot in the wild, and you're like, oh shit, a guy. Uh, you know, it's just nice. It's a nice reversal. It's there's a novelty to it. Anyway, that doesn't mean I only watch female VTubers. I watch male VTubers too. And one of the male VTubers that I like, well, I don't really watch him anymore because of this. I've had a trend of a pattern of this interaction. I'm gonna get talk about, which has kind of put me off. But the person themselves, the actual YouTuber, is fine. This was an interaction with their audience members that pissed me off. So anyway, I was watching him. He's fun. He's a real funny guy, and he's part of a company called Hollow Stars, which is the male branch of Hollow Live, but they don't care about the male branch because Hollow Live is all about idols. I know, like, sure most people know what Japanese idols are, like pop stars, multi-talented pop stars, and idol culture is kind of sexist, let's say, um, and so there's like a male exclusion aspect to it. Yeah, well, that's the thing is that the Hollow Stars were pandering to the prejudices of their audience. A corporation isn't necessarily doesn't have any, it's not a person, so it doesn't have any incentive to have a prejudice really, but um, their incentive is financial, and so if their audience wants to be pandered to in a prejudiced way, corporation will have no problems doing that. Yeah. So Hollow Stars is group of male VTubers are treated badly by the corporation that controls them and owns all their rights to everything, right? The corporation owns the avatar, the drawing and all the animations and the name and the YouTube channel. The actual YouTuber only has sort of partial access to their own channel. Anyway, and I was basically complaining in the chat about how Hollow Stars treats the VTubers poorly. And somebody was like, "Hey, come on, why you got to be all negative? Don't bring that in here." It is like, but I'm supporting the person we're fans of. I want them to be treated better by the corporation that controls their shit, like. But that was like, oh, he's causing waves, you know. So that was not great. And so I've never really watched Hollow Stars since then because I know that part of me is gonna get brought to the surface, and I'm gonna say something, and it's gonna cause an issue. And I don't want to like censor myself to that degree, so yeah, I just stopped watching them basically. Um, and now I watch mainly other agencies when it comes to the men, the agencies that don't have that idol based thing, which has that sexist culture. Niji Sanji, which is another agency, also big, has a lot of more male VTubers because they're just mainly about streaming video games. They're mainly just gamers. They don't have they do actually make music, and Niji Sanji have multiple bands signed to like major labels like Universal Records and stuff, and Sony, but they're not mainly into that. They're mainly just gamers, right? And there's no prejudice against men in gaming culture. I mean, maybe some internet commentators might have you believe, but yeah, no, there's not. So Niji Sanji don't have that same sexist attitude thing. It's not talking about my politics necessarily. I mean, I guess it is. Worker rights is part of my political worldview, but I can't help but think of worker rights as just human decency. Now, that's just basic decency. Work is a major part of an people in industrial society's life. It's one third, really. So, I to not think of it, to try and like see someone who's being exploited by an employer and not say something. I'm not. I can't do that. Like so, yeah. I've drifted towards the smaller agencies that don't have the financial clout to mistreat their employees to the same degree. Um, and therefore are sort of not incentivized to be real bastards as corporations and are nicer. Boutique outfits, that sort of thing, and independence. Mm. And also the ones who are at the big corporations but are so popular that their popularity gives them power to the point where they can kind of they can have their way against the corporation's interests. I like that, you know, because that's the people giving them that. Their fans, you know, like Kuryu Coco. She's a VTuber. She was the most profitable. She earned the most through super chats of any YouTuber. I don't think she's on top anymore, although I haven't checked. But she was on top for good while, and she made a ton of money for the corporation that she works for, because the Holo Live takes. So when you super chat someone, right? YouTube takes, or Google takes 30% of whatever you gave. So let's say you give $100. YouTube takes $30. So from the $70 left, it's you might as well think of it as $70 because the YouTube taking the 30 is automatic. That's the first thing that happens. And so after that, you've got $70 left. From that, Holo Live Cover Corporation, the parent corporation, takes 50% of the remainder, leaving the VTuber with 35%, $35 from your $100. So that's not great. But anyway, yeah, so if you think about, like, people were giving her a ton of money through super chat, and 50% of 70% of that was going towards this corporation, and they've got, a whole bunch of these people making money, so she's not their only income source. But, a big spike. Suddenly she's got power. She can make demands, and it's quite fun to sort of watch that unfurl. And, it does make you think about all the YouTubers that aren't as popular and don't have that clout, though, of course. But yeah. Yeah, so the authoritarian aspect of the culture is something I noticed for sure, where you never feel completely free to just talk your mind in the chat, because the chat is about the stream, right? That's the way they think about it. The chat should be a reflection of what's going on in the stream. Whereas, and that makes sense, but I did note pretty much immediately that that's not how we do it in English speaking culture on the internet. The stream is always independent of the chat. The two can interact with each other, but I've been in chat, and actually I randomly popped into a like left tube stream, and the chat started talking about some specific political thing that the streamers were not talking about. Someone randomly brought it up, and it caused a big argument in the chat. And the chat and the stream were completely unrelated to each other for a good 20 minutes. Like, as this argument worked itself out in the chat, and that, like that's yes, Painocus, don't talk about how the sausage is made. Absolutely. And that's not only like that's so deeply entrenched that it's become like reinforced by the powerful corporations, like mandating that in their rules and stuff. Yeah. But yeah, like the chat and the stream being 100% interrelated to each other was something quite an alien concept to me, and it is very sort of restrictive, but it does make it sort of about the streamer and like a celebration of them, which is nice, I guess. But what it means is that they have these. A lot of the VTubers will have a separate stream window that is for a stream that's never going to happen for like 3 years from now, where it's called free chat, right? And in there you can go in and just talk about whatever you want without all the standard rules, which is cool. But because it's not a thing in English speaking culture, English speakers come into that and go, "What is this? Why is the stream 3 years away? What's going on?" Even though like there's one channel, Pikami, right, VTuber. She's part of VOMS, which is this logo here that represents that group. Um, Pikami, her free chat is in English. The title it just says "free chat room," and it's like immediately below. You know when you click on a stream that hasn't started yet, there'll be the little box in the bottom left corner where it has the information about the stream. Directly under that is the title, and all they had to do is like just look down at the title where it says "free chat room" to know that it's a chat room, right? But if you stay in that chat room around the clock, you can count up like 200 a day, 200 people a day coming in and going, 3 years, what the fuck? What is this? Lol, someone screwed up or like something like that. And it's, man, it grinds you. Yeah, I thought that was funny. It's one of the cringy things about the internet, though, that people who have more information about it will understand not an in reference, an in group thing that's like commonly understood, that's not commonly understood by people outside the community. And then people outside the community will think it will assume it's some kind of some other thing like an accident. In that case, they thought the streamer had just accidentally put the wrong year or something. Um, but actually, the mistake is being made by them, not the streamer. They're the one who made the mistake. I was in some chat rooms in the 90s. I don't have clear memories though. I was a kid. I remember it was probably about 1996. Was in my first chat room, and I remember being in chats in 99, 1999, when I became an atheist, and me and my friend, who was also becoming an atheist around the same time, we were like cringy anti-theists in Christian chat rooms. We were like, "Oh, you believe in God because you're stupid. You're stupid for that." It's like, yeah, because that doesn't come across as stupid at all. Doing that. Yeah, so that's my only memory of chat rooms in the 90s. But yeah, anyway. um, Voms, by the way, this group here, that's who, this is Monoe. She's from the same group. I have her badge because I think the design of the badge is cool. Um, more than I watch her all the time or anything. She's cool. She does have a tentacle fetish though, which is kind of weird. Oh yeah, ASL. Yeah, I remember that. Talking to real Americans. Oh, I remember talking to a lot of Australians in the early internet era because that's who's next door. Didn't seem like you'd be paired up with people who are right next door, but it sort of did work out that way for some reason. I wonder why. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, so VOMS. That's a group, not an agency though. They've got a manager, Gary. Gary is yeah. Learning about this stuff also made me learn about Gary. Gary is amazing. I'm gonna put in the description. Tentacle fetishists are valid. Yeah, I'm not saying it's not. It's just it caught me off guard. um, okay, description. I'm just gonna edit this description real quick. All right. So, I mean, actually, I could probably wait on this because it's not the sort of thing you can click into while you're watching this. It's got sound, so you can't do it both at once. Might as well just wait till the end. All right, screw that. But yeah, so now I've got a playlist on this channel anyway of stuff to do with VTubers that I've collected. Um, in that, there's a song by Gary. Gary is a jazz musician a jazz composer primarily, um, who specializes in vocaloids. And vocaloids, I don't know, you might not know what a vocaloid is. A vocaloid is like a human voice created through like a human through a musical instrument. It's recorded. They're based on an actual person, a person's real voice, but you can like synthesize it. Yeah, exactly. She's the most famous one, Hatsune Miku. Yeah, I believe she's the most famous one. I think so. Um, yeah. So Gary is a jazz composer that likes to use those the vocaloids. And this particular song, though, is an instrumental. There's no vocaloids in this one. It's the There's voiceroids as well. Voiceroids are not meant to sound like singing. Vocaloids sound like vocals singing, and voiceroids just sound like human voice. Gary likes to make voiceroids sound like singing by mixing them because he's that kind of guy. He's like Kurt Cobain, who intentionally played guitar left-handed because he found it more difficult than right-handed. He was ambidextrous. Um, seen Hatsune Miku live in concert. I don't know about Hatsune Miku, but much. I know that she's got a body pillow because Thought Slime made a joke about it in one of his videos. But anyway, um, Gary makes jazz music and he likes to use vocaloids, and he is also really into like otaku culture and VTubers, and he's he does the art in his music videos for his songs on YouTube. So he's an artist and a musician, and he likes to draw his style. The style of his drawings is like um, some Powerpuff Girls esque. And if you look at the Japanese, there was a Japanese adaptation remake, I guess is the correct word, of Powerpuff Girls. They're still in the same style, more or less, but they look a bit different. And it's not exactly the same. Anyway, one of the Powerpuff Girls is a dead ringer for Pikami, in my opinion. But anyway, so he likes to draw cartoon characters in this Powerpuff Girls style, and he noticed that there's no drawings like that. There's no characters like that in the VTuber world. They're all like traditional anime, like all of them. So he was like, "All right, I'm going to design some Powerpuff Girls then." And there's three Powerpuff Girls, right? So three VTubers, and but because Gary is, in addition to being a genius musician and artist, a good guy, he didn't set it up like a corporation, an agency. He created them, the drawings, the avatars, and then gave the rights to the avatars to the people he hired to be the VTubers for the avatars, right? So you a VTuber has avatars um, created by someone and then given to another person to be the performer of that avatar, right? To have that avatar. And normally you retain ownership of the avatar and they work for you. That's how it works. But he was just like, nah, I'm just going to give them the rights and they have the rights to their own names, designs, and channels. They run the channels. And so it's like, it's nice. It's like in video games when I discovered um, twin, oh God, what are they called? Oh no, this is embarrassing. The people who made Dead Cells, Motion Twin. Mm, yeah, it's like that. It's always nice when you find an entertainment creator who's got good worker rights values and stuff. I mean, Motion Twin are an actual anarcho-syndicalist collective, so and a cooperative where every staff member gets paid the same amount, and it's a lot because they do a lot of business. Yeah, nice place to work. So that Gary's setup is not quite that awesome, but it's pretty awesome. Well, also, I guess I should keep talking about Kara's situation. Kara eventually got surgery, and she basically they rebuilt her knee. She's got a metal. She's got a bionic leg. I actually bought Dead Cells on multiple platforms. SRG. I rebought it on Switch when it became available on Switch because I was like, well, I want to support Motion Twin. And to be honest, the Switch version of the game was superior in my opinion as well. Not by much, but it was. Anyway, so Kara has a titanium knee, and she's slowly recovering. And I would have done this hangout earlier. I had the inspiration to talk about this a while back, but Kara's been living in a cage, basically a crate. As she's for the first 3 weeks of recovering from surgery, she lived in a cage. Um, yeah, oh, it's really sad too. Like you know, seeing this athletic dog who used to run through the bush, and jump around and stuff, just living in this cage. And like it's especially sad because injured animals, they become very vulnerable. And Kara, like I don't know if you have a dog, but dogs when they get injuries, you oftentimes won't even know about it because they don't make a fuss. Like Kara would injure her dew claw multiple times, and we only noticed it by like the fact that she was licking at it later. They don't make a fuss normally unless it's really bad. But Kara has multiple times since the surgery has had a minor injury to her foot. Like she stood on a pebble kind of thing. You stand on a rock and it's like just happens to be the jagged edge pointing up kind of thing. She's had that happen a couple of times. And she made a real big deal about it and was hopping around and was like, whimpering, and she seemed like really scared and stuff. And it's like then 5 minutes later she's fine because it wasn't a major deal. And it's just so sad to see a dog like be that way, be that vulnerable and reliant. And in a way, she's kind of pushed her recovery a bit too hard because she's the kind of dog that you can't really hold her back. But yeah, hey, Big Gil, she's down there. That's why I keep looking down there. Hey, Big Gil. I'd point the camera over there, but because Kara's been at home every day and hasn't been at daycare in months. Um, Kara hates the vacuum cleaner, right? A lot of dogs hate vacuum cleaners, and I can't vacuum with Kara like anywhere in the house. If she can hear it, which my house isn't massive, you know, so one person lives here, one human. It's not a big house, and she can hear the vacuum cleaner from anywhere in the house. And like I can't. She will make a massive deal out of it, and it'll be an incident. So I can't vacuum. So I haven't vacuumed my house in ages, and the floor is abysmal. So I don't want to like move the camera because you might see how terrible my floor is. But I mean, there's not much to look at. She's got a shaved leg. That's kind of weird. But yeah. But anyway, lesson is if you're going through a difficult time, you can get absorbed into something and focus on that. And in this case, in both cases with Marvel Comics and with this, there have been things that have made me happy, things that encourage you to be happy rather than things that are like too, um, where it could go either way, which a lot of entertainment is not designed to necessarily make the viewer or whatever listener, whatever, feel happy, uncomplicatedly happy, But and I mean, Marvel Comics, what I was reading isn't necessarily like that either because they're complex narratives. Jonathan Hickman, the comic writer, he's a brilliant writer, and some of the stuff he does is narratively really like cutting edge and advanced. Um, structurally and with the way he interweaves things, and so it's really cool. That's not what I mean. I'm not talking about simple. there's a lot of drama and there's loss. There's one particular moment in his run of Fantastic Four. Jonathan Hickman's run on Fantastic Four is my favorite comic of all time. There's a sad bit in that that's really famous. But so I'm not necessarily talking about that because I read that and I was going through a tough time in my life when I read it, and it made me sad to read it, which is not ideal. But because Jonathan Hickman is so brilliant at what he does, it was a joyous experience anyway, because you just get wrapped up in this person's world they've created and how great it is and how invested you are. So yeah, that's kind of what I've learned, is that I can get through difficult times by seeking out a new um, media, entertainment, cultural experience and getting really into that as a way to sort of. I've avoided using the word distraction because think about, like, when I was in last year, when I was going through difficult times mentally, mental health wise. I I was sad a lot, um, and like, how do I say this? This is complicated stuff. Um, Ideally, I should make videos about these things, but I'm just not up to that really, which sucks. I do kind of want to make a video about VTubers, but I don't really know how to go about it. And yeah, it's a for someone who's not making videos, it would be a tricky one to start with. There's a lot to say, and there's a lot of levels, and you could really be offensive unintentionally by doing it wrong, I think. Anyway, yeah, so I've avoided using the word distraction because last year when I was going through all those difficulties, I never didn't think about them. I was sad because of them a lot during that period, but it didn't get worse beyond a point where it could have been drastic. Something bad could have happened permanent wise. It stopped it at a certain point, and I would still think about it at that point, and it was still bad. But it it just yeah, basically halted it, and to the point where I was able to sustain it and draw it over a longer period and not let it overwhelm me. Um, and so distraction is not the right word. You will think about whatever's going on in your life a lot, like with Kara. Like, every time when you're watching a stream, oftentimes the streamer will be like, "How is everyone? How are you?" And I'll be like, "Well, I'm not great because I'm sad about my dog." I wouldn't be like, it's not distracting like that. Um, so it's not evading like confronting the emotions of what you're dealing with. I don't think that's healthy. Um, Mind you, I'm biased because I have borderline personality disorder. That makes you very it makes you externalize your emotions a lot. So I'd definitely be biased towards thinking that that's better than repressing them. But I do think that that is true anyway. I think I would still think that. So yeah, it has enabled me to have a joyous thing in my life that's interesting and complicated and a lot to sink your teeth into and learn about. Um, that makes you happy, but also enables you to work through and process other things that are going on in your life that are bad. And I guess I wanted to do this stream because I'm trying to sort of brainstorm, process, work through how I want to talk about this stuff in a more formal way. Because I do think there's something there. Hmm. It's not something I've seen before. People sort of advocating. I normally see people talking about getting really into something else as an escapist aspect, and that's not what this is. Because this is something that you can't escape from. Some problems you can have an escapist attitude towards, but when it's your dog in a cage right in front of you in the floor of your lounge, you can't. You look at it every second of the day. Like, like, well, apart from when you're going to the bathroom, but otherwise it's a massive cage. It's, it fills up half the room. um, because she's like not a small dog. She's a large dog. We had to get the largest crate you can get that we could get. And it's still, I kind of wish it was had been a little bit bigger, but she's out of it now. Anyway, yeah. So it's not an escapism. but I do think that certain types of entertainment experience, and it's a complicated thing on the internet because internet culture is, what do you call streaming? It's like, it's not a show. It's not. I don't know. Maybe I'm just old fashioned, but I find it difficult to categorize these things like taxonomically. Um, entertainment, cultural entertainment experiences, narratives, stories, and characters and things like that. And VTubers might just be streamers who mainly play video games, but they are characters, and you can learn. They all have. Um, because I never got into, that's another thing about this is that I never got into video game streamers. I never been on Twitch. Like, I just never, it was never my thing. I never really saw the point, you know. But with VTubers, a lot of the times they're like good at a lot of things. I'll give an example. So my favorite VTuber is this girl called Kazami Kuku, and Kuku is a voice actor. That's her main thing. If she wasn't a VTuber, she'd be working as a voice actor on like a anime or something. She's got massive range in the voices she can do. Naturally talented at it, that kind of thing. And also fairly good singer and a quite good dancer and an ex gymnast. And she's got a lot of different things she could do. And so, as well as playing a video game, she'll also like do karaoke over the top of that, and make it more complicated and stuff. So there's more meat there than just video game streaming. That's part of why I got interested in it, because just watching a video game streamer who only does that is boring to me. Invested in any lefty streamers? Is Mallory asked Mallory. No, no, I no. I try. I know there's a breadtube person who does streams. Can't remember the name, but no. If there's other ones that you could recommend, I might give them a watch. But it's never appealed to me. Well, not not since I've not been a YouTuber myself. I used to do streams a lot when I was a YouTuber, but I was invested in myself. Just noticed Bunny in the Box has said it helps avoid the black dog get invested in a project. Yeah, for me though, because that's a project is presumably something that's self-driven, right? It's you that's generating it, and for me, that just puts more pressure on. If anything, I guess maybe you're talking about some kind of collaborative project where there's other people involved, but to put that a project for me, that's something that I'm doing the work on, and that it's like me driving it. And I don't think that's necessarily, because that's a lot of that's work at that point. Um, I'm not sure if I'd agree that that's what I'm. I mean, I'm sure that that's. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying it's not covered by the sort of thing I'm talking about. I think because being a passive audience member is part of it. Um, like not passive audience, being just a normal member of the audience of whatever thing you're part of is part of it. I think. Like with VTubers, I've tried to blend in with the English with the Japanese speaking viewers and not stick out. I've got an English language username, so I stick out a little, and my my avatar is not an anime character, so that makes me stick out more. But sorry, I rocked the camera. Um, yeah, so I would just sort of lurk, blend in. Um, and I think it's important to be sort of just one of many for what I'm talking about. And the same with comics. A lot of people read comics. Um, with comics, it's slightly there's a difficult aspect to comics, which is that they're a solitary experience. With a show, you can watch a show together. You can watch a movie with other people. You can only read a comic by yourself. And that's true of like novels too, but novels get adapted into movies. Comics do too, but not the storylines generally. And if the storylines get adapted, that's very loose. In comic book movies, it tends to be just the characters that get adapted with new stories or stories that have been so drastically altered from their source material that they're not the same anymore. Like, for example, in the Hickman verse that I was talking about before, a lot of the ideas in the Marvel Cinematic Universe come from that because it was very popular and being written at the time when a lot of these movies were being planned, right? So, for example, Captain America: Winter Soldier, the storyline of that movie about how spoilers about how there's secretly that um, Shield has actually secretly got Hydra inside it. Well, that's from the Hickman. That's from the Hickman verse. That's first was seen in a comic um, that Hickman was one of the writers of. That it was Secret Warriors. But in the Secret Warriors in the comics, it's completely different. Like completely different in every way. Beyond that one sentence of oh, it turns out that Shield actually has Hydra inside it. That's the similarity. Any if I what do you call it? If I describe either of the things further, they'll start sounding very different. Um, for example, in uh, in Secret Warriors, which is an amazing comic by the way, great comic. It's a sort of superhero spy comic, um, espionage thriller, but with like action fighting superhero shit as well. Um, in that, Shield is already dissolved. Shield doesn't exist anymore. Shield has been dissolved by Nathan Osborn, who's the Green Goblin's, well, the Green Goblin, the original Green Goblin. Um, he's become president of the United States through a whole thing I'm not going to get into. Anyway, he bans Shield. He liquidates it. Just like yeah, disassembles it. So it's retroactive. They're like, oh shit, turns out Shield was Hydra all along. It's already not a thing anymore. So it's a retroactive story. Whereas in Captain America: Winter Soldier, it's like, oh shit, turns out the organization we're currently working for is Hydra, which is a whole different story. So even when they take stories from comics, it's not the same story. It's very loosely related. With novels, though, ultimately, you're never going to get a novel that's exactly the same, a movie that is exactly the same as a novel it's based on, but at least you can get it closer to the point where someone who's seen a movie but and read a novel can talk to someone who's only seen the movie, and they can have a talk about the narrative together. You can't do that with comics. I can start talking about comic book stories that have been adapted loosely into movies, and you'll have no concept what I'm talking about. Oh yes, June, the June adaptation. Oh man, I am so deeply conflicted about that on such a visceral level. Denis Villeneuve, he's my favorite director, like who's currently working. Arrival is brilliant, and Blade Runner 2049 is amazing, and June is my favorite novel. You'd think this would be the best thing ever for me, but I don't think June is adaptable. I don't think you could make June into a good movie that does the book justice. It's just too. It's too. There's too much. The lore is too deep. Um, in June, you need to have a good, deep understanding of its lore to fully appreciate it, and you can't communicate that in a movie or even in a miniseries. The miniseries failed to communicate it accurately as well. So I just don't think you could. I don't even think it could be made into a good comic with like where there's a lot of writing still. It needs to be a novel. It needs to have that much words because the lore involved. It's like fictional history, that like there's so much meat. And it's not like the narrative is such a unique, independent thrill ride on its own merit that you can separate it from the lore and just enjoy it on its own. Like maybe you could with Game of Thrones, for example, or something like that. With June, it's a fairly up and down story, um, but the lore is makes it what it is. The lore fleshes it out and makes it interesting. Like, the fact that the Bene Gesserit witch order has all these myths they spread. If you just knew about the myths, like the myth side of it, if you like were an inhabitant of the planet Arrakis and just knew about this myth of the Muad'Dib, or the sorry, the I don't know, the Mahdi, you would, that's one thing. It's like a mythological story about a chosen one. Where have we, I think I might have heard that before. It's not exactly original, but if you add the lore onto it, that actually this myth is made up, intentionally made up by an organization that intentionally goes around spreading made up myths to planets in order for, if one of their agents gets stranded on this world unexpectedly, she can cycle through various myths, figure out the ones that this planet has had that have been spread to this world, and start fulfilling them to become powerful. Isn't that awesome? That's so cool. Like, you go like down on this planet that doesn't know about your order, and then you'd be like, oh, this is the planet where they've said that there's a young woman with red hair who emerges from the wastes with a, I don't know, 50 chickens. I don't know, I'm just making shit up, but you can be like, okay, so I got to get red hair. I'll dye my hair. I'll dress the clothes like in the drawings that we gave this to this world. I'll dress like that. You might even have in your spaceship an out of a room full of costumes where one of the costumes is the one from the drawings of this myth. And that, like, what June Messiah is not really a complete narrative in its own right. It's kind of just it's a bridge between the first novel and the second proper novel, which is Children of June. It's a novella. It's not really a story in its own right. It's more of a prologue to Children of June than an epilogue to June, but it's both really. So if you just stopped at Messiah and didn't read Children of June, I could see that wouldn't be that great. For example, in the mini series Children of June, they included June Messiah. I'm pretty sure, yeah, it was that way around rather than it being in the June miniseries. Anyway, yeah, so I'm in very two minds about that. I mean, if anyone can make a good movie out of June, then it'll be him, or movies, because the user James has said that he's splitting it in two. It's an interesting idea. I'd like to know the exact point that he's chosen to cut it off. That'd be interesting. I guess they can change, right? You can alter that right down to the wire. They've done that a few times on movies that have been split in half. They change the cutoff point for structural reasons. It was a good example of that. It was a really good example of that, where an event that actually happened at the start of the next one was moved to the end of the first one. Was it one of the Lord of the Rings movies? I can't. It doesn't matter. Anyway, happens a lot. Yeah. Anyway, I've talked about Kara. I've talked about VTubers and Marvel Comics, and I guess I could talk about Warhammer, because Warhammer Fantasy was the other thing during lockdown. That's what got me through the coronavirus crap. I got really, really into Warhammer. For example, this one's actually from 40k, which I'm not that into, but um, it's a little miniature that I've done. Pretty sweet. Um, I, I've got a bunch of Warhammer Fantasy stuff out in the yes, Nurgle. Yeah, out of my garage. My garage is like my tabletop gaming room now. But this morning when I was getting things together for this live stream, it was like raining so heavily this morning that it was flood conditions. There were floods. And the outside of my house between here and the garage was a mess. And I was like, I'm not going between there and there with a bunch of with a bunch of miniatures that I've spent like 40 hours working on, and then I drop them on the wet ground in a pool and they're ruined, like fuck that. So I was like, nope, I'm just going to show them the ones that are already in the house. And it turns out that the only one that's actually completed is that one that I showed you. Yeah, Nurgle. Yeah, that's the thing. It requires space for sure. I've got a whole garage that I've converted into a room with carpet and stuff, and there's a 6x4 table in there, and not everyone has that, for sure. So yeah, I'm lucky in that way. It's also expensive, but you can just spread the purchases out over a longer period of time. So slowly engage with it. If you want to quickly engage with a hobby, Warhammer's not for you unless you're like a millionaire. Storage, well, I mean, it depends. It depends. I've got my gaming room doesn't just have my armies, it has other people's as well who only play in that room. So they just store their stuff as well there because that's the only place they use it. So I've got like 4 armies worth of stuff in there, and that when you've got that much stuff, storage is a nightmare as well. Um, but I just got lucky in that way with the house that I live in. There's just space for that, which is nice. Well, in the garage, garage, whatever. But yeah, um, I wanted to I wanted to bring up Warhammer Fantasy for 2 reasons. One is that I have a stupid amount of hours. I keep rocking the camera, sorry. I've got a stupid amount of hours in Total War Warhammer 2. Total War Warhammer 2 is an amazing video game, and I've got hundreds of hours in it, and it's awesome. And that's how I got into Warhammer Fantasy. But the thing that's struck me most about it is that one thing I've noticed about fantasy universes is that the elves are always super noble, and you're supposed to be like, yeah, elves are awesome, and they kind of shit on the dwarves. Have you noticed that? Like in Tolkien, like Tolkien kind of doesn't like dwarves much, seems to, and seems to worship elves, and so dwarves kind of get a bad rap, and elves come across in this sort of unintentionally arrogant way that's off-putting in a lot of these fantasy universes. But in Warhammer Fantasy, it's not like that at all. In Warhammer Fantasy, elves are kind of arrogant douchebags who everyone doesn't like. Humans don't like elves. Dwarves don't hate elves. Everyone kind of hates the elves because they're just kind of douchey. It's kind of like they're just kind of like, oh, I know, I'm so good, all that. Oh, I'm the very picture of grace and beauty, all that bullshit. And they just like they just play that up in Warhammer Fantasy and just kind of like they're just kind of arrogant tools. Like, whereas the dwarves are really interesting. Dwarven culture in Warhammer Fantasy is amazing. The dwarves are the best race. Like they're better than the humans. They're objectively like better people than humans are, which is kind of bad, I guess. You probably shouldn't have racial characteristics that clearly defined. But yeah, the dwarves are really cool. Orcs. Well, greenskins in Warhammer Fantasy. Because you got your gobos as well and your various other types. But yeah, I've brought along. Well, this was just what I'm reading, so it was in the other room. But it's Gotrek and Felix, um, which I honestly think is one of the greatest fantasy series ever written. And it's only because it's part of Warhammer that it didn't get the sort of Lord of the Rings level attention that it should have got. The flag, that's a IWW flag. It's from the IWW store. I don't know if it's the sort of thing you can always get. It might have been a temporary thing where you might not be able to get it anymore. 40K, I'm not that into, because it's like I don't know. The community in 40K is kind of it's quite right wing. It's a bit fashy vibe. I don't know. Like I like some of the novels and stuff, but Warhammer. I mean, I don't play Warhammer anymore either. I haven't done for quite a while. I might play it again. But the cool thing about it is that you still have all the stuff you made. Even if you're not playing with it anymore, it's still stuff that you made. So that's pretty cool. And I'm not naturally like that. Like I had to, I'm terrible at painting and all that, and there was a lot of work for me to get to where But it's important that you do it yourself, I think, rather than contracting it out. So I had to teach myself a whole bunch of new skills. It's interesting though because it's making me think about what that person said about what Bunny in the Box said about having a project. Because I guess that's what the Warhammer Fantasy thing was. Because that's yeah, Painocus, 40k fans who don't get the joke. It's exactly right. Because the people who write the lore for 40k are not fascists. The people who write the lore for 40k are writing it with a wink and a nod, and you're supposed to get that, but a lot don't. That's one of the issues. Like Dan Abnett, he's not fash. I think he's just basically a moderate. Um, yeah, he's not right wing anyway. And he writes a lot of this stuff, and it's sad that people read that and come away with with that kind of impression of it, but and him, I guess, by extension. Yeah, that's not ideal. But yeah, Warhammer Fantasy is doesn't really have that fashy vibe as much because the Empire is not as much of a big deal in it. They're just kind of like the generic humans. They're the most generic human civilization in it. There's more interesting human civilizations like the version of Russia. Well, that's another cool thing about it. Actually, it's one of the things I wanted to bring up is that fantasy. One of the cool things, the sort of trope things about the fantasy genre, is the maps. Like you get the map of Westeros, and you're like, oh, I can work out where all the dominions are, and all the physicality of it, all the geography of it all, and that's cool. But that's sort of entrenched. That's part of it. But 40k, so when Warhammer Fantasy go in a slightly different way, where the Warhammer Fantasy world just is Earth, it's Earth, but it's like the countries and everything. It's a Earth with a different history. So all the lines, the artificial boundaries are different, although the cultures often come up similar. Um, but yeah, the lines are drawn differently, and there's a few odd things. Like there's an Ulthuan where the elves live. Is this thing that rose out of the ocean, so it's something that doesn't exist in our world. But it's just kind of cool in a fantasy universe to have Russians, like it's like, oh, these hardy wintry Russians, they're great at fighting off chaos hordes. I don't know, I like that. And it has the whole the Tomb Kings, the undead Egyptian necromancy vibe, which is just cool as well. Yeah, it's interesting, Bunny in the Box. The actual Tolkien landmarks are not in New Zealand, none of them. But that's where everyone goes. I know because I live down the road from one of the places they visit. Although not anymore because it's 2020 nightmare year. Yeah, so there's a good example of 2020. I live near where the workshop, right? I used to go past there every day on my way to the dairy. So the dairy, that's New Zealand slang for convenience store. It shouldn't be because they don't. The dairy products are only a minority of what they sell, but that's just how it is. Language is stupid. Um, yeah, I go past where to workshop on the way to the convenience store, get my like milk and bread and crap that and junk food and whatnot. And so I go past there a lot, and it's the sort of place that there's always like random tourists. If you go there on a Saturday, there'll be tons. If you go there on a Monday morning, there'll be a handful. There's always people there. Going in the store, shopping in the Widow Workshop store, which is fucking expensive, and you have to be really ritzy to be able to shop there. But a lot of people go there just to sort of browse the awesome products that they have, even though they can't afford to buy them. And then there's the tours of workshop. There's lots of stuff for tourists to do anyway. And so, it's the sort of place there's always people there, and it was very profitable for the Wellington film industry. That's gone. It's like there's nobody there now. The people there now are New Zealanders. Like it's all local, and so the tourism is like, yeah. I mean, it's not a, I'm not making a breakthrough by pointing out that tourism's taken a hit because of a global pandemic. But it's interesting how that sort of splashes out, that it affects industries that aren't related to tourism, like film. Yeah, well, Tolkien himself was all about the like English countryside, right? He was obsessed with like pastoral English themes. He thought that like that was like the height of human experience. Oh man, that, I'm just reading Trapdoor Spider's thing about Harry Potter. That is bad. Anyway, well, I pretty much said all I wanted to say. Yeah, I do think I would like to make a video about this concept of getting through traumatic experiences and recovering from difficult times in life and stuff by throwing yourself into something not as a distraction but as a facilitator of emotionally processing what's going on in your life. I do think there's something there. I think it's complex. I wouldn't know how to make a video about it yet. Thought maybe doing this live stream might help me process it. I'm not sure I've gotten that out of it, but it's nice to talk. Mm, yeah. Anyway, I thought I'd give a sort of update of what I mean, I've given up trying to predict the future of my interactions with YouTube because I'm almost always wrong. But I think I'm not actively working on the dispossessed video at the moment. Um, that is mainly because of the situation with Kara and her recovery, though. That was when I stopped working on it. Was when that happened. Because it's work. You know, like I was saying before, I consider that to be work, and it's not that I don't really have the um, space in my life for that right now. But I have started working through the book, um, marking it up and making ideas for the video and stuff. And I've probably done about 25% of the early stuff pre-script phase. So I'm really not far into the work. But I have got more ideas for what I want to do with the video than I had when I was at this stage of the rocker video. So I'm feeling good about it. It'll make a good video. I'm not sure when it'll come out. It's probably going to be months. I'd say still months. If I was actively working on it right now, I might feel a bit better. But Kara's about halfway through her post-surgery recovery now. Well, actually, she's not. She's less than half. 4 weeks is halfway through the the difficult part of the recovery process, where I have to like keep her on a lead when she goes out to pee and stuff. That's the thing about her condition. She's had knee surgery, but she could completely shatter the knee again and make the surgery a waste of money if she does the wrong thing, and it can happen in an instant in the wrong situation. So, like, the vet surgeon told me an example of a story where a dog saw a cat and just bolted off after it and just shattered the knee and made the surgery pointless. And all the recovery time started again from zero. And I don't want that to happen to her because, well, frankly, I don't have the money and resources to have that happen to her again. Um, but yeah, so after a certain period of time, though, she's roughly back to normal-ish, and we're not quite halfway through that yet. But once we're through that, I think I'll probably start working on the dispossessed video again, and I'll write a thing about it or whatever. I might do some more live streams in between now and then. I'll see how I feel. Um, but that'll be probably the only thing that I'll do. Well, pets are very important to me, SRG. My pet is because I live alone. I've lived by myself for most of my adult life. It's just how I prefer. But it gets lonesome. So it's good to have a pet. Yeah, it's me and her. But anyway, so I'll keep putting community posts in. If I when I start working again on the dispossessed video, I'll let people know. I'll let you. I'll put a post up through that. Not that many people see those, but I will. Um, and I will hopefully maybe do another live stream. I don't know what it'd be about, but it's interesting. I didn't talk about the election at all in either stream I did today, even though that just happened. Because it's a total coincidence that I just happened to be able to get. I'm in the position where I can do this stream now, and with Inkara's recovery, so that's why I did it now, not because of the election. But maybe I'd do a stream about US political stuff. I mentioned earlier in the other stream that I'm a bit out of the loop with what's going on in America, just because I haven't really been following it that much. Because it's sad, you know, it's, it's rough. I've seen a few things. I like on someone news did a video about um, the police stuff, and there was a thing where oh, yeah, the New Zealand election worked out well, but I wasn't even following that. I didn't find out about that until after it was over. Well, I mean, it's good that Trump isn't president anymore, but it's it would be a mistake to think of it as a much of a positive move, a positive step. That's why I think that's part of the reason liberal democracy works so well to keep but remain as a status quo because you think of that as a victory, but it's actually just the continuation of the system as normal. You know, and I think liberal democracy needs a villain like that every so often to reinforce itself. You know, a villain comes along, and they're all like, "Oh, they're bad," and then they're like, "Yeah, but we can get rid of him. People power." And then you get rid of him, but you still got the same system that created him in the first place. You know, there'll be another one, and that other one will probably be worse. Maybe who knows? They seem to get worse over time. I'm not saying it's not a good thing, even if just to piss him off, Trump, and his followers, and be like, "Yeah, not everything is a good news for you people." Same as like when he got coronavirus. It's not nothing positive is going to happen because of that. But at least you can be like, well, it was like so. Talk about some more news again. That was what Cody Johnson said about it, which I really agreed with. This is like at the end of the day, even if it's just this one thing, it's positive because it feels like cause some level of cosmic justice. Like it's not the world's not totally insane, and like there's some he had some negative repercussions for his years of being a total piece of shit. Yeah, the memes that actually that is one thing I was going to talk about in this stream about the VTuber streaming thing because that streaming culture in general, no matter what website you're on, it's especially true on Twitch, I think, but on YouTube it's true as well that this sort of cringy, like childish meme culture stuff is like everywhere, and I don't hate it or anything. And sometimes, in some ways, I engage with it. Not often, but there are a few that I find amusing. Um, but it bothers me because it's how the fucking Nazis got in. They slided their shit into that and with that, and yeah, it, like for example, here's an example, right? I was going into a lot of Discord servers for VTubers to talk about VTubers, because I mainly hang out in Japanese language environments where my ability to communicate is very limited. um, so it's nice to talk about in English sometimes, but in these bloody Discord servers, there's all these like Pepe the Frog emojis, and it's like, I mean, I've been out of the loop for a while, but last I checked, that's not cool. Like that's not okay. And it made me not feel comfortable staying in the server at all. And then I think they can slide that shit under the door by going, well, he's just a meme character. I'm just memes just express a human thing, and I'm using this fashy frog emoji to communicate whatever the frog's expression is. It's normal, but it's not. Yeah, so that meme culture stuff about about streaming is really not is I find it really cringy. And there are VTubers that like appeal to that on purpose, go out of their way to appeal to that edge lord cringy meme culture shit. I hate it. Yeah, yeah, I worry about that stuff. That because there was a story. I know a guy when I was on Twitter, 2017. Uh, I can't remember what his username is anymore. It just doesn't matter. But he would tell his story quite a lot on Twitter, which is that he was a 4chan teenager who was radicalized by the KKK on 4chan. Members of the people who turned out to be in the KKK subtly like influenced him towards fascism, basically. And he was 14 when it started, and they sort of groomed him and others. He wasn't the only one they were doing it to. It was a group of them over the period of like 2 years. And I know shit. I mean, I'm not sure that they're still doing that. They probably are. I don't know, but that his story kind of freaked me out. Think about all these young kids being influenced by this backdoor meme culture, fashy shit. And it's exactly the same as what happened with Nazism in the 30s and 40s, where they hid behind socialism. Socialism was popular with the young people, the political up and comers. And oh, hello, Lito. It's nice to see you too. Um, and they just sort of globbed onto socialism, despite the fact that they fucking hated socialism and would go on to put them in camps, actual socialists. Um, and they just use it as a tool because it was popular with the young people. And it's this meme culture shit is the same thing. And I think that's part of why I was put off from streaming culture and didn't get into streaming. But yeah, with the Japanese, it's different. They don't have that. They've got memes, they've got meme culture, but it's not that cringy stuff in the same way. It's sort of more just sort of nice, generic, nice. Well, I've been going for a while, and it's been a long time since I used to do these regularly where I could talk for 3 or 4 hours. My voice is going. Yeah, well, in the Laugh House to Go is talking about a sort of person like Trump, but less, more coherent, which is a danger for sure. It's a terrifying thought. And I didn't think there was one though. I was trying to think of someone who is like that, who has a following. And I thought it's probably the situation is not too bad because there's no one to fill. Well, what I was talking about is the fact that the far right reactionaries, fascists, they tend to part of the appeal of a character like Trump is the fact that he's in power. And before that, before he got into power, it was the fact that they thought he could get into power. So that's part of the authoritarianism thing, right? The fact that he's now out of power, or is going to be, will lead to a decline in the support for him among the far right, because they're attracted to powerful people, and he's going to be less powerful, right? So I was thinking, is there anyone who can step in to fill that void? And the only person I could come up with was Ben Shapiro, but he's too young. They like older men, older white men. But somebody said Tucker Carlson, and I was like, oh god, it's gonna be him. It's gonna be fucking him. Joe Rogan, he's not far right. He's more of just a sort of cringy centrist type, sort of slash conservative. I mean, globally, he's a conservative. Within American politics, I'd say he's more of a centrist. Well, that's the thing. Like, so Steve Bannon, Steve Bannon is not the sort of charismatic strongman type. You need to have that sort of personality, that aura around you to be one of these people. It's like a prerequisite. It's like in order to be an actor in a film, you need to be comfortable performing on camera. Regardless of how you are as an actor, you need to have that prerequisite or you can't do it. So it's kind of like that with these powerful far right politicians. You need to have that strongman vibe, or you're not gonna make it. And I do think Tucker Carlson, even though he's a sort of it's mad to think of him like in his old really old school days to be that kind of person, but there is kind of what he's become in the modern American fascist movement. Oh, totally. Trapdoor Spiders point out the Richard Spencer thing. Yeah, if Richard Spencer hadn't been like neutered in front of the world politically, like that running away from getting punched in the face, he was done. I mean, they still hero worshipped. Like, there's that clip of him arriving at Charlottesville, and he still got an ovation. You know, still got applause and all that. But he wasn't. He wasn't the. It wasn't the same. So yeah, I do think that one incident did stop Richard Spencer from filling that void. I do think Richard Spencer's also a bit young, but he could have been a part of the machine. He could have been the next Steve Bannon type. Yeah. See, in fact, I didn't actually read that far through your comment, Trapdoor Spider, but you even said that. Yeah, I do think of him as a future Steve Bannon type role, but except for the fact that he was punched in the face. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing is, sorry, my voice is going because I'm not used to speaking for this long. The thing is, Mallory, that they don't even need to have the more extreme views. All they need to do is pander and appeal to the people that do. The thing about the Nazi leadership in Germany, a lot of them didn't have the level of hardcore like race hate and stuff that they projected onto their supporters. They just appealed to that as a way to get into power. I'm drinking. I'm drinking. It's just that publicly. I've been speaking for the last hour and three quarters without stop, and I'm not used to doing that. That's why I am drinking. Maria Salazar. I have heard of that. Yeah, I've heard of that. I don't. I'm not sure. I heard the name before, but I've heard that someone quite bad got into power in Florida. Still watch the punch video. Yeah, there's a couple variants of it where they put it to music that I like to watch every now and again. Yeah, well, that I mean, I don't think I think both the US and the UK lean quite far to the right. Yeah, and I like it's weird for me because in New Zealand we are a left leaning country, um, and it's weird for me to like in the UK you can be unpopular, um, regarded as a rich wanker who nobody likes, and still routinely get into power by just appealing to the prejudice against migrants and that exists among the voters. Yeah, oh god, the UK and their second wave turf bullshit. It's just so everywhere. You can say like turfy shit on a panel show and it'll go down fine. It's like, ugh. Yeah, I've heard casual comments on British panel shows about trans people and gender stuff in general that it's like, oh, I can't imagine someone getting away with that in this country or even Australia. Like, yeah, I do think England is a right wing country, and I think America is too. Oh, see, there is just before I started the first stream this morning. I was watching. I don't watch the show regularly because I think I used to a long time ago, but it's such a fucking status quo enforcing machine now. Well, it always has been, but I've woken up to it, which is Mock the Week. Mock the Week, their job is to enforce the fucking status quo with humor. But anyway, I was watching a bit of that just to kill some time while I was before the stream earlier, and so a clip came on, a photo of Corbyn, right, Jeremy Corbyn, and even though he's not a thing anymore. He's politically irrelevant now. They still fucking went on about the anti-Semitism conspiracy theory, and it's like, oh my god, like these same people on these panel shows, British comedians, will milk the fact that the government's horrible for comedic effect and literally profit off the fact that they can mock the government for being horrible, but then also globbed onto this far right propaganda conspiracy theory about Jeremy Corbyn being an anti Semite. It's like, dude, part of the reason why England is in a right wing hellscape is because you people helped spread the bullshit idea that he's an anti Semite and meant that he wouldn't win an election. The guy who would solve it. And like here in New Zealand, uh, I mean, we don't have a Corbyn. Corbyn's further left than any mainstream politician in this country. But Jacinda Ardern is our closest version of Corbyn, and we elected her, and we just re-elected her. Not by I think she didn't win by that much, if I understand correctly, but she won. Um, and it's like it's sad because they had an even better version of that as one of their options for 3 elections, and just never chose him. It's really surprising. It's so sorry. I was reading Melly's. It's really surprising to hear. Yeah, it's. Have I got news for you? I don't watch even To Kill Time, Jay Roberts. I hate it because part of the reason for that is because they helped fucking mainstream Boris Johnson. They helped spread the idea that Boris Johnson is not really a far right lunatic with his nose up the ass of rich billionaires. No, he's a sort of comedy character who's harmless. He's just for a laugh. And it's yeah, yeah, he's in charge now. One of the first things he did was get coronavirus because he's a moron who doesn't know how to isolate. Yeah, yeah, and it's like I was listening to them, like raging against the government, and then immediately after that, calling Jeremy Corbyn an anti-Semite. It's like, dude, that ah, what the people who you were railing against are supported by billionaires who own newspapers who made up a lie that you're spreading about the guy who could have fixed things. Oh, so frustrating. Yeah, I had to pull back a bit from British politics after he lost the last election because it's like, my God, like I'm not massive into elections as a way to solve problems or anything, but it's striking when you've got Corbyn on one end and then like terrible right wing scumbags who have drawn the UK into a fucking nightmare for the last 10 years. And yeah, it's frustrating. Yeah, and there's a thing I've heard people mention because Britain's current political situation started in 2010 when a right wing coalition government won an election. And the same basic group has been in power since then for the last 10 years. Anyway, the person who was running against that group and the Labour candidate, he lost because this is the single event that him losing the election is attributed to. He was doing a vox pop style street interview. I don't know why politicians do this. It seems really dumb. But he's doing a vox pop style interview with a woman on the street, and she started complaining about Romanians. I think she was. Oh no, I think she said like, "Where are all these Eastern Europeans coming from?" It's like, well, Eastern Europe. But anyway, she was complaining about Eastern European immigration, and afterwards, Gordon Brown, this politician, got into a car and forgot to disconnect his mic, and referred to her as bigoted because she's bigoted. It's a fact, and he lost the election because of that. And it's like, oh yeah, thank God we sidestepped the person who accurately called a bigot a bigot. Thank God we didn't get that mess. Instead, we got 10 years of austerity and a 400% increase in homelessness. So that's cool. And now we've got children who can't afford to eat. That's the current scandal in Britain, one of them. is that the government failed to sign into law a thing that would feed starving children because they thought it was too expensive. And then and then it came out that, of course, taxpayer money funds their meals, and actually they get they're pretty extravagant. Yeah, and yeah, so all these British, ostensibly left wing comedian, liberal type comedians are all going on. How dare this government not feed starving kids? It's like, you elected far right leadership. What did you think? You think far right people give a fuck about poor children? Did you read Dickens? The whole point of Dickens is that rich people don't give a shit about the poor. Starving miners and starving miners, yeah. It's interesting. Politicians said to be fools. Yeah, yeah, no, politicians aren't fools. I mean, it depends. Because it depends how you define words, I suppose. Like Trump, you could say is a fool because he doesn't know how to talk properly and gets things wrong a lot, and he doesn't have good general knowledge. But at the specific thing he does, he's good at it. I mean, not enough to get a second term, but you could argue that a lot of these right wing politicians that become president, they tend to, in their first term, be more moderate to try and make sure they get a second term. Trump didn't do that. Trump was balls to the wall right wing right from the get go. And Bush was too, but there have been right wing presidents who, in their first term, weren't so bad. So maybe Trump crammed 2 terms worth of bad shit into one. And that was his strategy because he didn't think he could win the second one. Oh man, the test and yeah, that has been frustrating as a New Zealander. The coronavirus thing, like we and a few other countries, there have been a few countries that handled it well, and New Zealand did, and we don't seem to get a lot of credit for that in the around the world because there's literally you can trace the exact way we did it and why it was good and learn from that. But apparently, it's not on the cards. It's a shame, but predictable. I mean, it wasn't ever something that the United States would do. So I don't think the US could learn anything from it because in order to do what New Zealand did the single biggest government spend in the history of our country to prepare for coronavirus. Single biggest dollar amount the government has ever handled, which is a lot. And in the US, that wasn't on the cards. They were not going to do that. Oh, really? Spend a whole ton of money? The most money ever? No, most money ever is always spent on the military in the US. They're perfectly willing to spend stupid, stupid amounts of money on military garbage. But yeah, I mean, it was treated as a public health crisis here that needed a massive government spend, not as an economic crisis. And I've had conversations with Americans on the internet where they're like, "Oh, but in America, because we've got a federal system, we couldn't really there wasn't really anything the federal government could do. It had to be all up to the states." And I don't think that's true. I think there's definitely things that the government could have done because they passed a COVID package, right? A legislative package in U.S. Congress, just like everyone did in late March or whatever. It's just the thing they passed was shit, and it was full of fucking compromise with the right and all this stupid crap that gutted it. Like I get that in a country like New Zealand that doesn't have states, that where the government has there's no competing power source like that. Um, it's probably easier to do the biggest government spend in history on that. But there's, I mean, I doubt that it's impossible in a country like, because Australia has states too. In Australia, while they didn't do as well as us, they did pretty fucking well. Mm. And like we're an island that helps for sure, but just being an island on its own is not enough, nowhere near enough in the current era of mobility, human mobility around this planet. Right, trapdoor spider. Are you say right, right, right? Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, that's yeah. It hasn't been here. The conservatives kicked up a big fuss about the fact that it was the biggest government spend in our history. Of course, that's their job, is to complain about that sort of thing. But it wasn't a big deal. The citizenry was just like, oh yeah, you know, it's pretty seems pretty necessary. What else are we going to make the what else big thing should the government be spending the most money on ever? Seems like this is a good thing to do that on. Something's got to have that role. Well, something's got to have that spot. Why not this? Why? How about not like tanks or some shit? Yeah. Mm. And there's other things like the tracking, the tracing system we have worked that helped. Like I remember learning that they don't do tracing in America. They don't have it, and I was like, what that what? Like, trying to process that they didn't even correctly do tracing at the super spreader event where Donald Trump got it. Journalists had to trace that. And then journalists were telling the United States government who got it from that event. It's nuts. Yeah. Oh, and Josh just pointing out masks. That has been a big positive step from 2020, in my opinion, is that it's normalized the wearing of masks in public spaces. For an anarchist, that's brilliant. That's beautiful. Yeah, in America, the masks became a political thing like that. Yeah. Mm. But yeah, like I can roll around the streets with with my face shield, my my full, you know, anarchist black bloc militant protester get up, and it's like just a normal dude. Yeah, I'm just being a responsible citizen. It's funny. That's the world now. You know. Yeah, yeah. Every right wing is a rebel until there's an actual concrete thing, in which case they are a defender of it rather than a rebel against it. They're always like a rebel in nebulous, like etherical. What's the word? Etherical terms. When it's an actual concrete thing, they more or less always are against the change. Yeah, it's been weird. Like in New Zealand, all that coronavirus stuff was so long ago, except for the brief period where we had the second wave, which is like I said earlier, just happened to be when Kara needed veterinary care the most. It was not as readily available as it should have been, which sucks. But other than that, we really just had the initial thing in March, April, and then early May. Then it was over, and we haven't really thought about it much since. But for the fact that the rest of the world still has to talk about it a lot, and the knowledge that it could always get back in this country somehow, even though everyone who comes here has to be quarantined and everything. It's not completely foolproof. Someone will slip through somehow. Yeah, so it's sort of always in the background. But it's like in Japan, same sort of thing. in Japan, they've had another thing come up. I can't actually remember what it is. I was reading about it the other day, but they've had another public health crisis come up since coronavirus, and they're more worried about that. You know, like, yeah, it's funny. Yeah, well, it's so weird. So the reason I brought up the thing about how New Zealanders haven't thought about it in ages is that Britain, a lot of British TV shows just started up again, Taskmaster and things, and they're all in the sort of new coronavirus world mode where all the seating is far placed far apart and there's not many people in the audience and stuff. But the shows are back on, and I was thinking, is it's kind of weird that like these shows start up in September, or was it October when they started? It might have been October. Yeah, October. They're starting in October, and it's like have they just come out of lockdown? And it turns out, yeah, that's why they've all started again. Is because British society is now getting back to normal. It's like holy crap. I don't know Trapdoor Spider. I might be because I can't give it a name, and I was only reading about it vaguely recently. Yeah, I might be wrong. It might be not a public health thing that they're dealing with. It could be something else, but they're dealing with a nationwide thing other than that now. I know that there's a government corruption scandal of some sort. There was recently, but I don't think that's what it was. Mm. Lockdown to does that do you mean like second wave kind of thing, or like are you talking about like alert levels? Like in New Zealand, we have like the four alert levels. We got like level four, which is like really really bad, where you can't leave your house and stuff. Is that and like, do you talking about like the UK's moved down a level or something, or I don't know. I know they've got a less coherent system in the UK where there's all these weird exceptions and stuff. I was reading about it, and comedians like to take the piss out of it, of course. Oh right, okay, yeah. I heard that London was, but I didn't know that it's the whole country. Right, yeah. But what is that? How does that going to affect those TV shows and stuff? Like, are they? I guess they've already finished filming, so they've just got in that window. It's interesting. One of the things that's been really interesting about the pandemic is all the way that's affected the film industry, in my opinion, because there's a lot of productions that were literally filming when the lockdowns started around the world, and it's like, man, I can't communicate to you how expensive that is. If you're in the middle of filming something and you have to stop and start again at an undisclosed time in the future, that there's very few outfits that would survive that. That is lethal to a lot of production companies. Like, and so there's a lot of productions that just stopped and may never be able to finish. They're just done. They're over. And it's the only that it's kind of a class issue in a way because the expensive stuff, Marvel movies, those Disney things, those things will have the money to finish. But if you were halfway through work on something, there's a lot of things that are more independent that are just dead now. Theaters, I think, might be gone. Movie theaters might be a thing of the past. It seems quaint to think about now, a room full of people crammed together to watch a screen. That seems nuts. Uh, I haven't been to a movie theater since, and I've got vouchers for the local movie theater. I just haven't used them. But like in New Zealand, because I was talking before about how the tourism industry has been gutted because nobody's coming. Um, other industry, the government has looked at other industries to kind of fill the void, and one of the industries they've sort of pinned their hopes on is the film industry. So the film industry has actually been given some leniency from the government in terms of how it can operate. And the Avatar sequels were able to get back up and running pretty soon after things ended. Mm. Yeah, it's really funny the Avatar sequels because I see them talked about on by YouTubers sometimes, and I've never seen a YouTuber say a correct statement about them. Not once. They're always wrong. It's infuriating to be honest. And I keep leaving these pretty nasty comments that I later regret. Like there's like a lot of channels that I otherwise respect will like veer into the talking about the Avatar sequels for a second, and then they'll just say something wrong, and I'll be like, "That's wrong. How can I trust you on the things I don't know as much about you as you do, when the thing that I know more about than you do, you said was wrong?" And that's probably taking it a bit far. It is funny though. It does make you think. Like my stepdad, he's a he doesn't do this for a job anymore, but he spent a lot of time as like a carpenter type person, builder. And so anytime there's like stuff from that industry in movies, it's always wrong in some way. And it grinds him. He's like, he can't watch the movie anymore. He's like, yeah, and I get that way too with some stuff. What do you mean local gig venues? You mean like music places? There's like nobody's doing live music? Yeah, there was a thing I saw actually on a comment. Like, so I'm a Bill Bailey fan and quite a big fan. I've seen him twice live, maybe three times. I can't remember. Anyway, um, he was talking about how he taught himself how to play a couple of musical instruments during lockdown, and in the comments on that, there were people saying that this is the first live music performance in Britain in months. Yeah, it's like holy crap. And I mean, like I said, New Zealand has recovered and has pretty much moved on, but culture has changed in some ways. And it's interesting to see, to wonder if it'll go back. I mean, it's hard to think it's going to go back while it's still a pandemic affecting the rest of the world. But once that's over, assuming that does end at some point, um, I wonder if we will ever go back. You know, like people are talking about the seating on the British panel shows, like I brought up earlier, how they're all the people are always spaced quite far apart. Makes sense. If that's ever going to change, if they're ever going to go back to sitting normally again, or if it's just going to be how it is from now. It could go either way. Oh, that's interesting, Trapdoor. So are you saying that small music venues have been hit, but then people are still allowed to go to big sporting events in stadiums? It does seem crazy. Oh, mm, yeah, that's nuts. I do think sport culture is does tend to veer towards center right traditionalism, conservatism kind of thing. I've noticed a bit of that. I think it's part of it is because of the whole it reinforces nationalism, competition, us versus them. Yeah, I can't even think about going to a movie theater. It seems like it's such an alien concept to me now. And I used to go to the movies quite often. It's very weird. I'm just thinking about it now. It seems very alien. Yeah, the politicians appealing to sports fandom is always cringy. Because I mean, like for me, what the fuck does that relevance? Who cares? Why is it relevant? Why can you win votes by doing that? It's sad that you care. What movie are you gonna go see? I don't even know what's on. It's really random because 2020 has actually been quite a good year for film. The ones that have come out, yeah, David Cameron's his gaff with incorrectly forgetting what team theoretically supports and confusing it for another team. Yeah. Yeah, there's been some good movies come out this year. The few that have come out, there've been some good ones. I thought that film Palm Springs was really good. Parasite was my favorite film of last year. I've been big into Korean cinema for a long time, 15 years, something like that. Yeah, I think it was 15 years because I went to Korea in 2006. And it'd be a bit before that I started getting into that stuff. Parasite is amazing class politics. It's great and is subtly anti-American in some cool ways. Knives Out was brilliant. But yeah, like 2020, we've had Palm Springs. That was really good. I thought the Bill and Ted film was really good too. The Bill and Ted film felt very 2020 to me. It felt very climate change. It felt related to climate change. And yeah, be interested to see when some of the stuff that there's a lot of things that were supposed to have been released already that have been delayed, and it'll be interested to see. Like, we'll never know if the pandemic shutdown interrupting work on things negatively affected them. You know, like it'd be so stink as a filmmaker to not be able to communicate to your audience that things weren't exactly how you wanted them to be because of that sort of situation. You can't really tell people that. Like, yeah. One of the side effects, interestingly, of the Marvel Comics thing that I went through in 2019 is that in when I don't I have a weird thing about people criticizing the MCU, even though I don't even like the MCU as much as the comics. And there's a lot of things the MCU has done that I really don't like at all, like the Thanos depiction of Thanos, which is completely wrong. Um, like I do find it like I get annoyed when people are like these movies support the military industrial complex, and I said I'm like leave my movies alone. And I acknowledge that aspect. I've got to work on that. Nothing is above criticism, but it's just because like I wouldn't make something like that personally because I think those kinds of movies, MCU, big entertainment shit like that, like people use that stuff to get through difficult times as well. People that part is the more escapist end of the spectrum, but it's like I don't know. I don't want to like try and take away someone's only thing that they're getting joy out of in life, Like, you know, like, oh, am I supposed to not like this anymore? The one thing that's getting me through the world? Yeah, the boys. My God, the comic of that is that guy. Good Lord. There's some comics writers that are right wing as hell. What's his name? Is that Garth Ennis? I always get him confused. Yeah, yeah, Garth Ennis. He's right wing. Yeah, I know the TV show's like good and the comics are bad. That's how I would phrase it. Like the comics are like reactionary and horrible and just depressing. I mean, the TV show's not uplifting or anything, but it's at least it's not horrifying. Kind of oh yeah, man. I noticed that when you're watching something that's clearly designed for a conservative like right wing audience, it's so striking. Like I was watching I just randomly stumbled across a American sitcom from a few years back. You ever hear of a show called The X's? It's got the some famous sitcom actors in it. Um, so it's like that's why I randomly clicked on it because it's like, oh shit, it, you know, Wayne Knight's in this, and Donald Faison. That's cool. Anyway, that show is clearly written for a right wing audience. Like it so goes out of its way, especially in the fourth season, to confirm the preconceived notions and the worldviews of right wing members of the audience. It's so obvious. It so stands out when you're watching it, and it's like, oh my god, it makes me like squirm. It's gross. Yeah, exactly. Bunny in the box. Well, I mean, actually, I wouldn't go that far. Starship Troopers, the original source material, is more right wing than the boys, and the Starship Troopers movie is more left wing than the boys TV show. I wouldn't call the boys TV show particularly left. It's just not right wing. Yeah, with Starship Troopers, Verhoeven like went out of his way to make something that with a fascist reputation into something leftist, which is cool. I like that. Yeah, so one of the things I was going to bring up in this stream is that video by Some More New. Well, it's not to call it a video is not quite doing it justice. The Some More News movie, which I mean, I actually think the central thesis of the video is actually wrong, but it's such a good video, and the evidence in it is really interesting to watch. And like, I don't think it takes much away from it to say that it's not quite correct. Yeah, Heinlein himself wasn't necessarily a straight up fash, but that particular book is. Yeah, exactly, Jay Roberts. They took the edgy shit out of the boys. That like sort of yeah, that typical fucking edgy right wing crap. Yeah, anyway, in the Some More News movie, the central thesis of the film of the video is that movies of the 80s and 90s where the plot structure, the narrative structure setup is that of a Trumpian like figure, a right wing populist appealing to, the worst, you know, personality traits of his base, and that, and then the sort of ragtag people's resistance that rise up against it, kind of thing. You can see this dynamic played out over and over with the fascist as the bad guy, and the basic idea behind the video is that this simplistic dynamic actually hurt our ability to fight against this stuff. And movies warning us about climate change played into the idea that it's inevitable, and it's inevitable destruction that we can't actually fix, and actually made things worse. Anyway, if you take that to its strip the context out, take the argument to its sort of basic level, what the argument is saying is that culture, entertainment impacts culture, drives culture, and that can have a negative, impacts. Where I think actually it's the other way around. I think that it's the relationship is backwards from what they think. That actually the culture is driving the movies, my evidence for that, I can see why he thinks it's that way around, and I can see why anyone in America would think that. But we watch all the same American stuff in New Zealand than what they make in America. We watch a lot of American TV movies and all that stuff, um, and that has not impacted our culture in the same way. Because I believe the relationship is the other way around. That the movies are a reflection of the culture, not a driver of culture. Right. So Heinlein's politics changed a lot over the course of his life. Yeah, right. Rather than being the sort of person who just could never figure out what he was. He knew what he was, but it changed a lot. Yeah. Yeah. See, Frank Miller just became a fascist after 9/11, and All Star Batman is a fascist comic. It's, I mean, Holy Terror is bad too. They're both fucking bad. Well, I'm in New Zealand where we don't have coronavirus, so I wouldn't worry about me coughing. No, I have bad physical health in general. I'm the kind of person who coughs and wheezes all the time. I'm just like that. Yeah, Josh, not only are those comics fascist, but they're also terrible. And I don't just mean like because they don't appeal to my political worldview. They're just poorly written, poorly drawn. They're just garbage comics. Well, I don't know if I'd say Batman is fash. I think outside of his use by writers like Frank Miller, I wouldn't necessarily call him fascist just like objectively all the time. He can be written that way by writers who write him like that, but whereas I don't think you could write a fascist version of Spider-Man. Like there's no that's not a thing. But yeah, whereas Batman is the kind of character where you could push him that way and you could depict him like that and make it, that would be something would that would be allowed to happen by the people who own the rights and all that. I don't think Marvel would ever be like, oh yeah, yeah, write a fascist Spider-Man. Like it's not going to happen. Um, so I think there is something to the Batman character that makes that workable, but I don't think he's necessarily a fascist all the time. I think he's the kind of vigilante figure. He's actually a perfect example of that. What I was talking about before about that whole thing with right wingers, where actually that was in the previous stream, not this one. I was talking about how right wingers pretend to be anti-authoritarian or think of themselves like that, but they actually aren't. And Batman's a great example of that kind of mentality because on the one hand, he's a vigilante who gets his own justice kind of thing, but he also respects the police. He's not anti-police. He'll work with the cops and he'll like if he sees a criminal beating up a cop, he'll like come to the cops. If he sees like a criminal and a cop fighting each other, he will come to the cops to beat the criminal up. He is not anti-authoritarian at all. On the surface, because of some things about him, you might think he is, but he's actually not. And yes, he's a billionaire. And the association between billionaire and someone who gets shit done and helps society, which is a totally false association, but is drawn in Batman's case because it sort of appeals to that Ayn Rand fucking bullshit view of wealth. I always thought it would have been better in Batman if rather than it be a criminal who shot Thomas Wayne, that it was a homeless person who like was having some kind of psychotic breakdown or something and stabbed him to death. It's like, yeah, mate, homeless people don't need to exist. They exist because people like you do. Yeah, Red Sun is not leftist, I would say. It's got this sort of aesthetic in some aspects that are sort of left wing, yeah, but well, no, I don't know though, Trapdoor Spider. Not all violent crime exists purely because of economics. Most of it, maybe even like a massively high percentage of it, but not all of it. There will still be some. Like if you want to single out greed motivated crime, then you could say that. My old videos. So no, basically this is the short version. No, 90% of them are gone. More than that, higher percentage than that. The Sargon response video has a mirror out there. And that's like It might be the best video I ever did. It's certainly one of the best ones. So that's nice that that's saved. But there's some other ones that I really would have liked to have been saved, like the secular talk one and the Tommy Hilfiger. No, what's his name? Oh God, um, I can't remember his name. Tommy Sotomayor. There's a bunch of those I wish had been saved, but they weren't. I was in a bad place when I deleted my channel, and I didn't really understand the ramifications of what I was doing. Yeah, honestly, that is kind of the vibe with Batman, isn't it? Jay Roberts, the billionaires hunting the deadliest prey thing. Does kind of, you get that vibe of like, well, I'm a billionaire, so I'm gonna put on a armored suit in the movies, case of the movies, and a APC to drive me around, and I'm just gonna beat up street level criminals. That's why I don't like DC, honestly, because in DC, the heroes do tend to be focusing a lot on like street level just thugs, and there are Marvel heroes that do that too, Daredevil and Spider Man sometimes. But like I tend to gravitate towards the characters that like fight Nazis, like Captain America, and I don't just mean in World War II, like Hydra, the organization that's a Nazi organization in the comics, and so like fighting that is fighting Nazis, and he fights Nazis a lot. There's a lot of like Elektra fights Nazis. I'm just a more of a fan of that. Yeah, H Bomber Guy has a video that he did based on my video that has some of my one in it. He still has a copy of that video too. So if that mirror ever goes down, I could probably get it off him. Then of course I'd have to reach out to him, and that might be slightly difficult since we haven't spoken in a long time. Yeah, it's funny with Captain America as well because this didn't come up with the movies as much, but in the um in the comics he's also a painter, a skilled artist, and there's something about that sort of appeals to the sort of ubermensch thing that I like. I don't like that necessarily in general, but the Nietzschean thing. But I like the fact that this guy who ostensibly spends his time beating up Nazis and questioning the U.S. government, he also is like an ubermensch with many talents and spends his time doing creating art and stuff. Just cool. Oh yeah, DC. Sorry, my voice is really. I'm gonna have to probably end this pretty soon. I'll go to like 2:45, 2 hours, 2 hours and 3 quarters. Um, yeah, DC attracted some great writers when they launched Vertigo. It was an amazing move. But do you know the story behind why they got Neil Gaiman and Alan Moore? It's actually kind of fucked up. So, um, at the time, there was a union dispute. The comics writers had a union, and they were having a pay dispute with Marvel and DC. Actually, I think it might have been. No, I think it was both Marvel and DC. They were both involved. Anyway, this is in the 80s. And it was the American writers. They couldn't. It was like the Writers Guild shut down. The Writers Guild strike in America that was like what 13 years ago, 14 years ago. It was like that. You couldn't hire a writer to write comics for you. And so they all went rather than settling the pay dispute and getting the writers back to work so they could hire them again. They just started hiring Brits to write their comics for them. So yeah, it was actually workers' rights being abused that led to Neil Gaiman and Alan Moore's careers. Which is and Neil Gaiman himself. I'm sure Alan Moore has thoughts about this also, but I haven't heard him speaking about it. But I've heard Neil Gaiman talking about that specific issue and being like, it kind of fucks me up that that's why they hired me to begin with. But you know, I'll take it. But it's still fucked up. Yeah, it was a way to pay the because they wouldn't, the alternative was paying American writers more, so they could either pay American writers a higher rate or hire British writers at the lower rate. They chose to do that because they're corporations, and that's what corporations do. Still, though, it's one of those things. I'm sure the American writers who didn't get hired were negatively affected by that. But on the other hand, capitalism did just give us Alan Moore, one of its best critics. Like, yeah, it's funny the way it shoots itself in the foot like that. Like, that saying about how if a capitalist could make money from the revolution, they would, rather than trying to fight it. No, Gaiman and Moore weren't scabs. They didn't know about it. They didn't find out about this till years later because it wasn't till like I think the 90s and to where because there were quite a few British writers by the end of this time. There was quite a few, but they weren't the same community. It's not like the modern era with the internet and stuff. They didn't know each other. The American British writers, they didn't talk. It wasn't until later that they actually started spending time together and got to know each other and became like an actual global comics writing community as such. So no, they weren't scabs. Like they were both real young. It wouldn't have been well informed. Yeah, I'm a big Alan Moore fan as well. It's weird with Alan Moore how many of his movies, how many of his comics have been adapted into movies that people don't even know were comics. Like you could watch From Hell and never get that it was a comic book movie. Stuart Lee. I've actually got a video on my channel that has stuff to do with Stuart Lee. It's my most popular video. Stuart Lee's my favorite comedian. No, I don't talk to any YouTubers anymore. I'm not on social media or anything anymore, and I didn't leave on friendly terms with quite a lot of them. Because shit be like that. Yeah, it was 2015 was my first year, by the way, not 14. Yeah, well, the Stuart Lee one. I mean, I could make a I could have done more with Stuart Lee. Like I've made reference to his video. Bob Kane. Yeah, actually, yeah. I think you might be right about that one. Um, right. Yeah, yeah. 2014 might be about right. I kind of one of the early things I trace it to is Captain Andy's video about Sargon, which I think was in 24. That was made in 2014, I think. I'm gonna, I'm gonna look it up because I do think that was part of the start. That was a very early one, sort of 6 years ago. Yeah. June 2014. Hmm. I never really talked much to libertarian socialist rants. Um, I've got no problem with. He's a good dude, but we just never really crossed paths much. But Captain Andy, I'm good friends with. Yeah, well, like I was saying about Stuart Lee. So Stuart Lee's he's he has a way of doing leftist comedy that's just genius. It just like it's impossible to argue with it. Like he did this bit about this UKIP politician who said that he doesn't want Eastern Europeans coming into Britain, but it's not because he's racist. It's not because he's prejudiced, xenophobic. It's because he's worried about Eastern Europe. And he's worried that if too many Eastern Europe high skilled workers come to England, then they won't be there to do the work in Eastern Europe. And he's really just concerned about these other countries. It's like, dude, you're in UKIP. You're a fucking prejudiced. Anyway, Stuart Lee basically spends 10 minutes just tearing this argument to pieces through comedy. And it's one of the funniest bits of stand up I've ever seen. And it's impossible by the end of it. He's put so much evidence on the table that this idea is horseshit that you can't argue against it. Paul Nuttall. Yeah, it's brilliant. I think you could show that to a Nazi and they'd probably be like, yeah, that guy's full of shit. The Paul Nuttall, the thing Paul Nuttall said. Because like specifically Britain, no country on this planet that I know of has been so forged by other countries than Britain. The name Britain comes from Rome. It's the Roman name. London is Roman. That's the Roman name. Yeah, it's amazing. England, Angles, the Angles from Europe, the Saxons from Europe, the language they speak being 50% French, 50% German. It's just like of any country. It's so stupid for a British person to claim that British culture doesn't need that is not impacted or positively impacted by like things that British traditionalists like Nazi Brits these days talk about as part of their traditionalist worldview are things that came into the country by a hostile, aggressive, invading nation state from Europe like 1500 years ago, coming in and killing a bunch of people. Like, can you imagine the people from then hearing that people who are like far right traditionalist nationalists use the, the culture of the people who slaughtered them in an invasion as British, quintessentially British? It's amazing. Am I going to be back at making vids? No, probably not. I've got a video that I am working on, sort of, not actively right now, but there's a good reason for that. But I will finish it at some point. But that's just the one video. The last video was 2 parts, so technically 2 videos equaling three hours. It'll probably be of a similar length to that, maybe a little longer, probably a bit longer. But that's the only thing I have on the horizon, and it's going to be months away probably. So yeah, for this channel, like I've got ideas for things I could do on YouTube, but this channel is, I mean, for me to release something not really too related to political anarchistic type stuff would seem, I don't know, would seem wrong. I think if my channel was called my name, then that's just you and you can upload whatever the hell you want. But this channel has a purpose and a thing behind it, a theme. So yeah, I think I'll just if I am gonna do unrelated videos that wouldn't they'll be on different channels. Oh, Iron Man, yeah. Well, because that was the 80s, right? So yeah. Oh, you prefer streams? That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, for me, streams are much easier to do. Like writing a video seems so final, writing a script and you're committing to it. It feels like, but in a stream, weirdly, you're still putting out information. It's in terms of result, it's the same, but it doesn't feel like the pressure's not the same. I don't know. Like I guess like I feel forgiving when I watch a stream. If someone gets something not quite right, it's a little off. I'm like, it's a stream. You can't expect everyone to get the information in a stream 100% accurate or the arguments 100% well crafted. But in a video, I'm like, well, you had time to fix that. You should have fixed that. You fucked that up. And I feel like from the other side of that, it's easier and less stressful to just do streams. So if I am back at stuff, it'll be back at streaming for the most part, if it at all, which it might be. I was talking before about how my dog is in a precarious health situation, and she seems to have taken this fine. She's just lying on her bed, um, and so that seems to indicate that she'd be okay with this being a regular sort of thing. Yeah, bloody Normans coming over here. Exactly, exactly. I mean, it was when people in England spoke French. You know, like England is so culturally all over the place and such a cultural like hodgepodge of different things. It's the opposite of a homogeny. So for British nationalists to be all like, "This is the line," the buck stops. It stops here. It's like, nah, mate. Yeah, exactly. That's why I thought I'd do it. Is let the dog, let her, because the thing is, she can't go out to pee or anything. Like I have to take her out every time, and so I did worry, streaming, that she would be like over by the door going, "Come on, I need to go outside" during it, and I have to be like, I have to, I have to just leave the shot for about 3 minutes and amuse yourselves, which wouldn't be ideal. Anyway, I'm gonna wrap this up. This was nice though. It was good. Yeah, it was good talking about stuff. Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, the US, but the US is a colony, a colonial society. Colonial societies are all like that. Like in New Zealand's the same way. We're a hodgepodge, like just in the same way. I think it's weird for a country like England to be that way, though. It's notable. I wouldn't call France the same, you know. All right. Well, thank you very much for watching, everyone, and keeping me company. I hope you've gotten something out of this, and I hope to see you again soon. All right. See ya.